And we have our first call of the day, and he is a great one. If you guys don't know him, he is the voice of the Charlotte Hornets, John Focke. What's going on, John?
Hey, how are you?
We are good, my friends.
And real quick, it's Focke.
Fokey.
Oh, okay.
Fokey, you see, this is my producer. He's the one who gave me your name, so it's John Fokey. So there you go. So, John, how are you and your family right now?
We're doing well. We're doing well. It's a unique situation, obviously. And I was just thinking about it today. How we had a game in Miami the night that the season was suspended. We had a great comeback from down 20, came back to win on the road in a very difficult place to play. Miami is one of the best home teams in the league this year. And then we're in the thick of things, like 4-game homestand, 2 on the road. We were coming home to a Friday Sunday matchup, and we had some big teams coming up like the Lakers and the Clippers, and finally, like, we were finally home and playing some good competition. The Blazers were on tap too. We just beaten the Houston Rockets at home, and so you were like back into the swing of things after the All-Star break and in a fun portion of our schedule, and then it just came to a screeching halt. And I said to my wife this morning, like, the first 2 days, that Thursday, Friday, and then the weekend, kind of felt like, okay, like this is a nice break, but you just expected to get back to it, relatively quickly. And now, what are we going on, 6-7 weeks, and it's just like, wow, this is kind of the new reality. So, like you guys, like everybody else, you wake up every day, you read the news and get caught up on things, and wait to hear some sort of news, anything. And as of right now, we don't know anything, so we're just going day by day and waiting and trying to stay as sharp as we can.
John, have you been watching The Last Dance?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Religiously. I mean, part of the reason, anyway, like, I grew up during that time, and so I remember so much about that run, being of an age where I was incredibly into basketball. I've always been into the NBA. Like, that's always been my sport and my league. And so, at that time, the 97-98 season, I was a senior in high school, and man, we watched everything and you read everything. And so it's been a real fun trip down memory lane, but obviously there's even more to it now because Michael Jordan is the owner of the Charlotte Hornets. And so a lot of the people that you see in that documentary are people that we see around the office or
Right.
at all staff meetings and stuff like that. So it's really unique situation to watch it back and relive those moments. And I think the thing that I've loved the most about it, guys, is just like you forget the minutia of an 82 game season. You kind of remember the big plays, you remember the highlights. I mean, it's 22 years later.
Yep.
And so going back and like the Rodman taking a weekend off, like that was something I'd forgotten about. As they get into it, you're like, oh yeah, I do remember that. But that's been really fun. And then obviously, seeing some of the folks that we work with and getting a chance to pepper them with questions afterwards and kind of learn a little bit has been a lot of fun.
What is it like working for Michael Jordan?
I mean, it's great. It's working in the NBA. I mean, I don't think it matters. If you're working in the NBA, you're really enjoying it because it's such a great league. And basketball has always been a passion of mine. The NBA has always been a passion of mine. And so, I was fortunate to spend 12 years in Minnesota with the Timberwolves and the Lynx. And of course, they were owned by Glenn Taylor, who, it was great getting to bump into him and getting, to be a part of that. And now moving to this organization, it's a blessing for sure. And it's just been a ton of fun. So, anytime you're working in the NBA, it doesn't matter what team, you're incredibly fortunate and you're grateful for it every day.
We are talking to the voice of the Charlotte Hornets, John Fokey. Now, John, you lost Kemba Walker. Kemba Walker left from free agency to go to the Boston Celtics. What are your thoughts right now with Kemba Walker, the growth of Kemba Walker as a Boston Celtic, and what you saw as a player, as a Charlotte Hornet?
Well, to be honest, guys, I started right around the time that Kemba Walker left and went
Really?
to Boston. So I actually never spent any time. I never spent any time covering him. I never called a single game of his. I mean, obviously, being in the league for the last 12 years in Minnesota, or the previous 12 years, I should say, in Minnesota, I had an opportunity to see him play. But was never really around him, but
Right.
you could feel when I got down here in June, you could feel the impact of Kemba Walker and what he meant to this city. Obviously, what he meant to the franchise. He's the all-time leading scorer. He left as, the top of the record book in numerous different categories. But the real impact was, I thought, in the community, and that's where he felt it the most. And, he reminded me a lot of a guy that we had in Minnesota in Kevin Garnett, and how when KG was drafted by the Timberwolves, he came in, he immediately made Minnesota his state. He made Minneapolis and St. Paul, the Twin Cities, his home. And he lived there. He was in the community. He was constantly giving back, and he really became the face of that franchise, and still to this day sits atop many of the records in that organization. And Kemba did the same thing. He was drafted, he came to Charlotte, and he immediately became a part of the fabric of the community. And so, it's kind of ironic that both those guys ended up leaving their franchises and going to Boston. It's kind of a weird coincidence, but I just think his impact on the community, his impact on the organization, were all incredibly positive. And obviously put together a tremendous year, his final one in a Hornets uniform, and he's been able to carry that over to good success in Boston, and obviously surrounded by some very good players up there. And Boston was having a great season before it was suspended. So, you're not going to hear in the city of Charlotte, or, I would assume the entire state of North Carolina, you're not going to hear a negative word about Kemba Walker, because everyone understood what he meant to this organization, what he meant to this community and to this city. And I think, fans obviously were disappointed to lose him, but his impact here was so positive that nobody had a negative word when he left.
From their former point guard to their current point guard, Terry Rozier's leadership throughout his career has been questioned a lot. It looked good, and then last year he was saying a lot of bad things about the Celtics, then he got traded to the Hornets. What have you seen from him this year, and have you seen some of the positive side that he was a great leader like he was with the Celtics when Kyrie Irving was hurt?
He's been tremendous in a Charlotte Hornets uniform. I've loved getting to know him. I think, again, a guy that you watch from afar, you see their game, but you don't really get to know them as a person. And being in the Western Conference, Boston came through only 2 times a year, and so you didn't really spend a whole lot of time around certain guys. But this season, getting a chance to know Terry, getting a chance to watch him up close and personal, he was having a great year. I mean, I want to say he was averaging about 17.5 points a game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. He was shooting 40% from 3. He is a selfless player when you think about coming in and being signed as the starting point guard, and then seeing the ascension and the rise of Devontae Graham and realizing that, hey, Devontae is going to be in the starting lineup too. How do these guys maximize their talents together in the backcourt? And Terry slid over to that off-ball spot, and those guys found great rhythm together, and they do a great job playing off of each other and, taking advantage when the other one's got the hot hand and those types of things. So I love what Terry has brought to this team. I love, from a leadership standpoint, how hard he plays, how hard he competes, what he brings defensively. And then there's just, with Terry and with a lot of guys on this team, there's a fearlessness that they play with. And if it's a big moment, they all want the ball in their hands, which is great because it makes the team very versatile in clutch time situations. And you saw that if you go back and look at the season, there were games where Terry hit big shots. There were games where Devontae hit big shots. There were games where Miles Bridges or PJ Washington stepped up and hit big shots. And when you've got options like that, and you've got guys that are, willing to embrace the moment, it makes your team much more dangerous in those types of situations.
We are talking to the voice of the Charlotte Hornets, John Focke. John, this is one of the youngest teams in the NBA, and the growth of some of these young players that Michael Jordan put together over the last couple of years, they all have been growing. And Bismack Biyombo, he's been one of the best young, talented power forwards in the league. But Malik Monk, who I wanted for the New York Knicks when he was in the draft a couple of years ago.
Seems like every Knicks fan wanted him.
We all wanted Malik Monk, and he has really been a bust for the Charlotte Hornets. What are your thoughts with Malik Monk?
I would say that when you look at Malik this season, it's really unfortunate because he was really starting to find his rhythm, and again, like this is my first year around him, so I can't really speak to the last couple of years. And I know he's been through a couple of coaches, and this was his second year under James Borrego. And Malik, the thing that you were always looking for with Malik was consistency this season. And he'd have a stretch of games where you're like, okay, this is, we're starting to see some things. He's coming off the bench. He's playing with an aggressiveness. He's getting downhill. He's attacking. He had a double-double. He pulled down 10 rebounds in one game. It was the first time he's posted a point rebound double-double in his career. We saw some 30-point games out of Malik. And, but then there'd be a trough, and you wouldn't have that same type of production. But, man, over the last, and it was probably, I'm trying to remember how many games. It's been a while since I've looked at all my notes, but he had a great stretch where he was consistently coming off the bench and averaging about, 15 to 17 points
55 games. He played 55 games.
So he had a great stretch there towards the end where he was consistent, and it wasn't like consistent for 4 games. It was starting to spread out over a longer sample size, and you were starting to see how he could impact the game, and he was starting to get more and more comfortable. And so I think that's a great sign. And just back to your point about all these young guys developing, I mean, head coach James Borrego, when he came here 2 years ago, kind of laid out that, one of their things that he and his staff are going to do is develop guys. And if you look back to last year, Kemba had a career year. Jeremy Lamb had a career year. If you look at this year, it's not just the young guys and Devontae and Terry and Miles and PJ. It's guys like who you brought up, Bismack Biyombo is having a career year. Cody Zeller, who's in his 7th season, I think, and he's having a career year. And so this staff and this organization has done a great job committing to player development, and then you're starting to see it pay off, whether it's the younger guys like Cody Martin, Caleb Martin, Jalen McDaniels, or guys that have been in the league a couple of years. They're all getting better under this coaching staff.